Good evening, everybody. It's a true honor and privilege to be here this evening with you. A big thanks to the National Association of Women in Construction in Qatar and the Lean Construction Institute of Qatar for arranging this wonderful evening. And I'm really, really excited to share this presentation with you tonight. And also to everybody that are observing the month of Ramadan. A happy Ramadan to all of you, and good luck with your current endeavors. So let's start off. This will be a longer presentation. Feel free to ask questions, and we will have a Q&A session afterwards, but we might perhaps also be able to break for some questions during. So just to set everything for you clearly, I know the concept of smart cities better, and I have worked quite a bit with the US Green Building Council in the past, developing versions of LEED, so I have good insights to lean construction via my experiences through LEED, but I'm in no way an expert in lean construction. So this presentation will be a look at leaner construction via the prism of smart cities, if you will. So with that, let's jump in. The aims for this webinar are threefold. We want to start with highlighting the increasing value of us professionals in the lean construction and smart city spheres in the marketplace. There's a growing demand for our types of skill sets. We then want to explore how the concepts of lean construction and the concepts of smart cities may or may not be coupled. Furthermore, we want to acknowledge the value of data for decisions, in particular decisions for citizens. So we will look at it from a broader societal perspective, and then we'll narrow down into the citizen perspective. And in terms of the agenda, so we'll begin first to look at the urgent demand for lean. Lean construction and smart cities, two sides of the same coin. Leaner and smarter processes via the prism of a few case studies from Sweden. Leaner and smarter data and decisions, also based on case studies from Sweden. And finally, we'll look at the last and maybe most remote concept to you, engaging the central stakeholder. Actually, it's not so remote to you in the lean construction industry, more to the professionals in the smart city industry. And so with that, let's just dive in. Just one note about my research group, which is called Urban Analytics and Transitions at the Royal Institute of Technology. We're a mission-driven organization, which means that we typically have a lot to do, but everybody wake up and try to live up to this mission as well as they can, and that is to foster sustainable urban transitions through collaborative processes informed by analytics and ICT. And everything we do, we try to move that mission a little bit forward. So, in terms of the urgent demand for lean and smart, looking at the state of our planet, already what our cities are doing to it, or we in our cities are doing to it, is that we're pushing the Earth beyond its carrying capacities. Already in terms of species going extinct or disrupting nitrogen and phosphorus flows in our rivers, oceans, and soils, we have done irreversible damage to the Earth. Now, that being said, I think the Earth will be just fine in the very, very long term, but we depend on this carrying capacity for our own survival. And we are approaching that same issue in terms of land use change, climate change, where it's in the yellow zone and is closely approaching the red zone. So that's the broader context. And so therefore, let us look into our cities and their role. We can define our cities in 4 numbers, and you might recognize these numbers: 2, 50, 75, and 80. So what are these numbers? Well, basically our cities they cover 2% of the Earth's surface. They house more than 50% of the global population. They consume more than 75% of our global energy, and they emit more than 80% of our emissions. So by 2050, we're doing quite a journey. We're building 40% new city, not necessarily 40% new cities, but it could be suburbs and new development projects, but the surface area will be increasing by 40%. And this is to house 2.5 billion that don't exist yet. So that's about, population of Sweden is 10 million. That's about 250 Swedens that will be added to our global family. And that's a challenge. We may wonder, where will these this new part of our family be coming? And this is a century type of graph where we're looking at from the 1950s to the 2050s. And now we're about today, 2020, and the growth we're seeing happening is not so much in Europe or Northern America. We're seeing the growth happening mostly in Asia, in particularly China, India, Pakistan, but also Northern Africa, Nigeria, Congo. In the case of Qatar, it's only growing with about 1 million, but that's from about 2 million. So it's still increasing. But I think what we can take away from this is we need to get really, really good at what we do in terms of lean and in terms of smart, to be able to both help our own countries and cities to meet these challenges, because they're real and we're going to feel them more and more as for every year that goes by. But even more importantly, we need to develop competence, knowledge, and skill sets to be able to provide support to these regions that will be seeing this immense population growth. That's where these skills are even more needed, and where many cities will need to be constructed according to lean principles and as smart cities. And just looking at one very limited sector, we're also just to see that the demand will also be growing with this, is that we see a 40% increase in waste generation in the next 30 years in low to medium GDP countries. As a response to this, Qatar has released their National Vision 2030, and now Qatar is in its second operational national development strategy from 2018 to 2022. They're saying that this achievement of the vision is a national responsibility, meaning all of you that are living in Qatar right now are expected to help the state with these goals on human development, environment, economic development, social development, to build this institutional and organizational capacity building, and also public-private partnerships. And in particular, these public-private partnerships are being highlighted in this second national development strategy ahead of the FIFA games. And these PPPs are really a requisite to be able to do an integrated project delivery as it goes in the lean construction world. So I think by now we highlighted there is a demand for lean, and this will be growing, and so I think we're all in the right place right now to be able to support the world going forward. So now let's get in a little bit theoretical, if you will, just looking at lean construction and smart cities. Are they two sides of the same coin? Are they very different? Are they coupled? What's going on? So if you look at a typical building project, city project, neighborhood project, we roughly have these phases. Now you might have different categorizations for them, but they're roughly the same. So we begin with some concepts, designs, and development designs, technical designs. We construct the sites, the building, we hand it over to the client, and then it goes into its operation and future use, and even further down the line, potentially a demolition phase. Now, in theory, lean construction spans the whole gamut. And because lean construction it's a culture, it's a way of thinking, and it's a number of practices. So and it truly in theory it spans the whole gamut, but I would say it's probably in practice a little bit less prevalent or dominant in the operational stages, lean thinking today. Uh, and then we can look at the other concept, smart cities, and here we can talk about new smart cities. And yes, if you're building a new smart city and you're doing it today, you really should be thinking about that in the early planning stages, and at the concept design and even the technical design and development design. Typically, you would not care so much about the construction phase and the handover phase, but you would get obviously very involved here over in the operation phase. Now, I think today the majority of the smart cities are actually existing. They had everything built, the built environment was built, but they added some digital layers and some principles in the operational phase. So for existing smart cities, they're essentially only over here. So that's one distinction between these two concepts. And lead is lean. If we look at lean in particular, it's really about generating value and removing waste, generating value to the client, to the municipality, to the environment, and removing waste. And it does that through focusing on process and flow and continuous improvement. And kind of as a core pillar of all of that is respect for people. And so again, what we're looking at is in lean construction, why lean construction even exists is that when we look at the other sectors and the other markets out there, we've seen a productivity increase, but in the construction industry, we've seen a plateau and even a decrease over the decades. So that's one of the things that lean construction is trying to figure out why and really to remedy with some really good new processes. More so, what lean is trying to do is to optimize and increase efficiency of projects, making them more timely and deliverable and more made with a lower cost. Last but not least, it's the safety of the workers, and this goes back to this respect for people. So those are the things that lean is trying to optimize for. Now, moving on to the other concept. So we can look at a definition. There is lots of definition of smart cities. This is not necessarily the best one, but the most cited one from Caraglio and colleagues. And they say that the city can be defined as smart when you're investing in human and social capital and traditional like transport and modern like ICT, information and communication technologies, communication infrastructure, fueled by sustainable economic development and a high quality of life with a wise management of natural resources through participatory action and engagement. So if we unpack that, we see essentially there is at the core, there is some information and communication technology as an enabler, and then you have wise management of natural resources. So how do we manage the resources in our cities in a better way? And on the other side, you have a high quality of life, social capital, and the citizen engagement. And in a lot of smart cities that we're seeing today, that latter part, the social and the human dimension, is many times lost on us. So, and we'll get back to this. And taking a few maybe local to you smart cities as an example, we obviously have the mega project, Lusail City. It's a world-class sustainable smart city project, 200,000 residents, 19 self-supporting districts, aimed at a high quality of life. It has smart city type of infrastructure, smart homes, office spaces, pneumatic waste, smart grids, smart metering, integrated traffic management system. And a point that I really liked about it, it's that it has a strong focus on community and the human dimension and families. So, and it's being built and planned as we speak, and it's already partially built, and it will be going on for quite a few years. We have the other one, Mushairib downtown Doha. It has the highest concentration of LEED buildings probably in the world. I think they're all LEED platinum, and they house about 800 residents or so, I believe. And one thing that is really interesting is that they're trying to use the area to boost Qatari identity and heritage, which is great. And it has a number of other kind of social values in addition to all the smart technologies that it has there, like self-driving buses, solar panels, pneumatic waste, and feedback in smart homes. So two really, really, really cool projects. And this one in particular actually got a really prestigious award in Smart City Expo a couple of years ago, where they won the world as the smartest city in the world in terms of governance and finance. So that's not a bad achievement at all. So, and I think that has made quite a name for the area around the world. Growing out of this, we have TASMU Smart Qatar, which is essentially a smart nation program for all of Qatar. And I believe it has been enabled by having these developments in Doha to begin with. And what's really cool is that here they're trying to, and I believe it's led by the Ministry of Transportation, they're trying to use the power of ICT to deliver outcomes to citizens, residents, and visitors to Qatar, and drive the sustainable economic agenda set forth by the Qatari Vision 2030. That's the exact right way to think about a smart city or about internet and communication technologies for cities, is to use it for a very, very good purpose, like the Qatari Vision. So I think we arrived at a notion that these two concepts, lean construction and smart cities, they're deeply connected, and I would say complementary. So they're not necessarily exactly the same. You have some things you're doing in lean construction that you typically only would do in construction phases, and in terms of planning and integrated project delivery. And then you have some other things in smart cities, which deals with citizen engagement, designing engaging interfaces, connecting urban metabolic flow data from different sectors of the city to understand better what's going on in the city. But I think if you remember the first image, they're kind of very complementary in terms of their phases. So if lean construction, sometime after handover, maybe you still keep the lean thinking and the ideas of eliminating waste where they're exactly the same, but you do that with a slightly different toolbox and slightly different concepts when you get to the smart city and the operational phase. So I don't know if that could be bought as theory, but that's at least as far as we've looked at it, how these concepts are coupled. So, and is there an added merit to fusing these two concepts, lean and smart? You know, why don't we just stick to lean or just stick to smart cities? Well, we can look at the life cycle impacts in terms of emissions of a typical building project. This is one that's coming out of Finland. It's quite high quality. They have the actual research done for this. And what we see here, if we look at these kind of first columns, are greenhouse gas emissions. Roughly 10% come from the building materials that we choose to build our cities, and then another percent comes from the construction phase, and less than 1% for the demolition phase. And then you have about 88% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the maintenance phase. And then you can turn it around and look at, say, heavy metals for summer smog, and then you see there's quite a bit in the building materials and in the construction and demolition phase. So putting that together, if you are a mayor or a city planner, or if you're developing an eco district that really take concerns and goals like carbon emissions and clean air seriously, well, then you really ought to be working with lean and smart together and combine those concepts, because they're really intimately linked. And together, that's the only way you can address the entire chain of all of these environmental impacts. So I think that would be the best argument I would put out why a city would engage in this combined toolbox. So I think that takes us to through kind of the more theoretical part. Actually, there's going to be a little bit more theory coming as we move along, but let me just check the time there. Good. Now we're going to look into leaner and smarter processes, where we're borrowing the lean concepts and we're looking at them from the prism of a few case studies in Sweden. So, and by focusing on these processes and flows, we are generating value, removing waste, and continuously improving our cities. We'll break this one down into 4 sections: setting clearly defined goals and what's the value of that, following up on set goals, integrated design, project delivery, and an example of lean construction and smart cities combined, if you will. So that's the 4 ones we will go through, beginning now with setting clearly defined goals. It sounds cliche to set goals, but let's just begin with looking at the an example from lean. So here is a study where they looked at productivity as a goal in a specific project in lean construction, and that's something that was one of the things we're trying to optimize with lean, right? How about cities? So let's look at 3 eco districts in Stockholm. We have Hammarby Sjöstad. Some of you may have heard about it. It started being built at 1996 when Stockholm was going to receive the Olympic Games. It didn't, but it got this amazing city district. 11,000 homes and is completed this year. We have the Stockholm Royal Seaport, started 2010, 12,000 homes, completed 2030. And just as recently, we have a new area built by a private landowner. It's a church institution with 5,000 homes, completed 2035. So if we look at the goals of these 3 cities, it's quite interesting. There is some things to learn from this. Oh, I'm sorry. For this Hammarby Sjöstad case, they set out at around 1996, well, how do we do something better in terms of the environment? Much better. And the politicians at this time just said, make it twice as good. And there was a bunch of goals in terms of energy and water and waste that had to be twice as good at whatever the standard was in 1996. When we went to the Stockholm Royal Seaport, well, I'll mention a problem with that goal. When they set that goal, it was more as a visionary, ambitionary statement, and there was no idea about how do we follow up, how do we make our construction developers accountable to that goal. So what happened was, well, they did really, really well, and we had the Prime Minister of China come and visit it and encourage all of his mayors to visit the area to say, how can we replicate this city in China? And they've actually replicated quite a few of them in China. But the main point being, they didn't meet all their goals, and quite a few they missed quite largely on. And that was because there was no idea of accountability and how we measure and verify these goals as we go along. So we actually at KTH, we wrote a report about this issue, that we overlooked this issue here. And then when the city wanted to build this next district, they asked us to help them with that plan. So here they said we're going to be fossil fuel free by 2030, and we're going to and there's probably 50 indicators or 60 indicators that go below that, and for every indicator there is a verification plan set out where the data is going to come from and how it's going to be delivered to them. And then we still had one problem in this case, and I will get to that in the next slide. But then in this newest development, they're going to be climate positive, going beyond net zero carbon emissions. They're going to have twice as high social capital, and including a verification plan backed by a digital master plan. Digital master plan is essentially a plan of the city that explains how information and communication technology, sensors, data layers, and technologies and visualization screens are going to be able to support all of the smart functionalities of the city, and also help with following up and evaluating results. So what's the value of clearly defined goals, whether it's in lean or in setting a smart city with very high environmental or social ambitions? Well, these type of goals help both the internal teams, whether it's construction developers or subcontractors, to really know what to aim for. But it also helps all the to attract a lot of talent, startups, academia, and investors to the area. So it provides a type of leadership that we saw on the first slide we're really in desperate need of. And then I think this really helped us in a lot of our projects. We would sometimes, when we're trying to collaborate with partners that weren't like utilities and building developers that really didn't want to collaborate, we would always remind them of these goals and say that this was something laid down by the city. And more after that, they would typically open up and come in for a discussion. So that's another value of those goals. And obviously measuring and verifying them, make sure that everybody are accountable and are thinking ahead. If we don't do this, we'll be penalized, or maybe we don't get to build in this district anymore. So everybody are aware of that. Whatever their performance is going to be, somebody's going to see it, so they can't cheat in the building process, which unfortunately happens quite a bit. So then, in terms, we spoke quite a bit about measurement and verification. So let's look at that. This Stockholm Seaport case, as I mentioned, is about 12,000 new homes. It's built up on 9 phases that's going on for about 10 to 15 years. So as we were thinking about how do we create a good evaluation and monitoring plan for this area, and how do we refine the goals as we go along, we realized we're going to be, if we set all the goals and lock them down here in phase 1, we will have lost and then basically use the same goals and verification methods for the rest of the phases. We haven't made use of the knowledge we learned in the first phase. So and there's going to be new technologies coming in. So essentially what we came up with is something I think you would recognize in lean construction as well, is that we began with the requirements for the first phase, set down all the requirements, and then for all the building construction phases, we followed up how they did in terms of the performance of the construction and the materials, and then in the move-in, and in terms of operation when the resident had moved in, and that was phase 1. And for instance, what we learned in the early phases is that the very stringent requirements, like 40 kilowatt hours of energy per square meter, which is super low, that was actually met by the building developers, and it was even surpassed in some cases. So we could tweak that and bring that on to the next phase with a slightly higher twist, or they could create more renewable energy than anticipated. And some goals like recycling almost all the construction waste was a bit too steep. So there the city put in a lot of efforts to figure out why and how we could help them to meet that goal. So this is essentially an iterative learning process, and for each phase of we have data points that ought to be collected by the building developers. One problem. Now we have 30 building developers that have all of this data requirements. They have to send us data to be able to monitor and see if they made it or not. Well, what's the problem with that? The problem is that it becomes really messy for us to get an overview and to be able to access all of these systems. And there is legal barriers all of a sudden. So the building developer said, yeah, I monitor these things, but I can't give them away because of legal issues or data security issues. And it becomes a real headache. So the city is now doing very large investments to somehow be able to tap in to the data that they set out as requirements in the past. So now it's becoming obvious that they overlooked something in this district as well. And that was having a digital master plan to also instruct exactly how the data should flow and how the legal issues should be taken care of before they all built in their heterogeneous systems that measure the same thing, but in different values and with different what's the word? I can't kilowatt hours versus BTUs. Well, anywho, metrics with different metrics, basically measuring the same flow with different metrics, and so that would be dictated by a digital master plan, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing in that next development district, Stora Sköndal. So we're helping them to design their digital master plan to get over this, and yeah, that's it in terms of the processes. There is one more, and this is essentially it's a shortened version of a movie because of how GoToWebinar works right now. You will not hear the audio. I will speak over it and explain it to you. But I think it's a nice story in this use case that again merges the concepts of lean construction and smart cities in a pretty nice way. But we'll begin on the lean side. So this is a building logistics center built in the city of Stockholm at the Stockholm Royal Seaport. So here, it's a massive organizational collaboration where all the 30 building developers join this logistics center, and they have essentially one truck go. They share the trucks that are typically late. They're usually not always on time because of issues on the other side. We have people have to wait until their material comes. Some of the workers just go off and buy the things they need to not get further delays. And here, all of that is taken care of by having one really, really smart logistics center that plans very, very far ahead and uses this area as a short-term storage for all the materials so that then they could be delivered to the site as needed. So bear with me. Right. What happens then is that you have these very fuel efficient and sometimes electric vehicles that only deliver what's needed for today to the site, and only those materials are there, and thereby you're really minimizing the transport, which is one of the 7 lean construction principles types of waste to minimize. And you're also minimizing a lot of injuries because you don't have a ton of things just lying around at the construction site by different construction developers. You'll also notice that a lot of the resources in terms of machinery is shared by all the construction developers, so they don't have to bring any of that in. They're all sharing, cranes and moving trucks, so that also those resources are used very efficiently and also according to a time plan. And then last but not least, we talked about all these environmental restrictions. So in the Stockholm Royal Seaport, all the materials have to be very high, well sourced from clean sources, and that's checked for each material type, and they can only generate 20 kilograms of waste per square meter. And essentially, to encourage higher recycling rate, they are using putting in these recycling skips at every workstation, and they can even collect them at the floor level. So again, all of this is coordinated and then taken care of by this building logistics center. And as a developer, I just kind of sign on and have my workers there, and then this concept magically takes care of all the rest. So that was quite a bit of lean principles and lean thinking packed in to one project. And this is an ongoing project here in the Seaport. If you come by, or if you want more information, I'll be happy to connect you with the guys working with this. But you can also think about, well, what's going to happen with this logistics center when the build out is complete in 2030, in 10 years. Let me just move forward. There we go. Well, this is really where it is a great example from lean to smart. So you just convert it into a city logistics hub. So instead of having building materials going in, You have goods and packaging and postal services and everything that we're buying online going through the same building, and it's in quite a central place actually, and using similar contracts. The challenging part with this has been the business model and the contractual arrangements between all of these stakeholders to get everything to work. But they made it work for the construction phase, so why not for the operation phase? It is a bit more challenging on the operation phase, but again, here is a really good example of how we eliminate one of the 7 types of waste, e.g. transport, that is one of the lean thinking principles or types of waste. So the next part we're getting into, and I'm just going to double check how we're doing on time. All right. It's about leaner and smarter data-driven decisions. So while data is a very big part of smart cities, it is indeed also a very big part of lean. And the better informed decisions that are driven by data we can make, typically the better the results and the more efficient we get. And here we're more on the continuous improvement side, and then kind of increasing the value and the removal of waste and improving on our processes. So in the lean construction sphere, there is a really big need for both construction companies and their subcontractors and all of their planning systems and the building system to start talking more with each other and to use that big data to make better and more informed decisions. So we're just in the beginning of that journey in the lean sphere, and already quite a lot has happened. There was a study where McGraw-Hill Construction interviewed a lot of the stakeholders in the industry, and one of the key points of this was, if we're really going to be able to eliminate waste, we have to have a stronger collaboration within the industry. We need essentially to be able to analyze data, share data between our organizations, because we're different parts in this big machinery, and we have to have constantly keep check where the other parts are moving. And we depend on the use of data integration systems. And if we succeed with this, we really can advance the construction industry into a new age of efficiency and profitability. So here is this entire report is a really big push for that. We in the lean construction industry need to figure out how to use data better to derive better insights on a planning level down to the guys on the floor working on construction level. So then going from there, moving over to the smart city side of things, we can look at this from a very different perspective, going into Formula One racing for just a little moment, if you were to indulge me. This is Manuel Fangio in kind of yesteryear's Formula car from back in the 50s. Manuel Fangio, for those of you that are Formula One fans, he was and is the legend and the master of Formula One racing. He set every type of record you ever could set, and he's still very revered within the Formula One community. So his last record that hadn't been broken yet was broken about 10 years ago by Michael Schumacher over here. So if you were to ask Michael Schumacher, Michael, do you think that you're a better driver now that you beat Fangio's record? Michael Schumacher would probably say no, for 2 reasons. I mean, one, obviously the cars, the car, the aerodynamics, the tire, the engine is not really the same as the one that Michael Schumacher is using. So that's one reason. But there's another reason I think Schumacher would think about, and that's that the fact that his car has about 250 sensors and actuators. Sensors, things that sense and pick up data, and actuators, things that do and then turn off brakes and make changes in the cooling system. So that's Michael Schumacher's car, and you actually have these guys. They're not looking at his car; they're looking into computer screens. They are analyzing 8 terabytes of data that Michael Schumacher generates every race, or his car generates every race, And through that real-time analysis of that data, one of these guys have a microphone through which he is constantly communicating with Schumacher to giving him the strategy for the next lap, when to switch tires, take it a little bit easier, with the brakes next lap, etc. So Michael Schumacher has a completely different knowledge and awareness of his car. They're essentially one, and that's been a huge driver of performance, where internet and communication technologies has played a major role. Just as a fun anecdote, this exact same system that is being used here, I believe it's from McLaren, it's now being used in hospitals in the United Kingdom to save babies, where they're, instead of sensing the car, they're sensing babies that are just born, and can find anomalies in them with the same type of analytics, and provide them with better treatment, and they've seen a really good survival rate from that. That was an off-topic side point. All right, so where are our cities today in this kind of journey? About here. We're still pretty much completely analog. We're just about getting a little bit more digital in our cities. So we still have quite a bit of a journey to make. So now, to highlight what data can do for you, we can look at a case study or a few case studies of smart urban metabolism in the Stockholm Seaport, that second eco district I mentioned. And yeah, this will be kind of more an exploratory journey of the value of data to help inform decisions. We began this journey around 2010, where they were going to build a smart grid, and we were tasked to see, well, can you help with all of this evaluation that I mentioned, and evaluate and monitor all the other sectors as well while we were building the smart grid. And I think at that point we realized, yes, it's possible. We came up with the concepts and identified that it's possible. In the next phase, we brought in all the stakeholders that had a chunk of that data, and also decided on what type of feedback we wanted to deliver on a city level, building level, household level, and an individual level. And that was about it. And then we really realized another thing. Most of the data we needed was here around us. We didn't have to add a lot of new sensors. That was also quite an interesting acknowledgement. Then we actually went to play around with this a little bit. So we set up a environment to be able to collect all of this data and transform this into key performance indicators like greenhouse gas emissions per capita. And we use urban metabolism principles to set all the system boundaries of this district. We looked into all the data sources we wanted, their spatial resolutions, their temporal resolutions, and their different data suppliers. And one by one, my job for a couple of years was just to knock on doors and more or less beg for data and make them share the data in the way we wanted it. Based on that, we developed a framework, smart urban metabolism, where essentially we again noticed most of the data is already there in the city. We just need a good way to integrate that. So we created an integration platform that spoke very many languages and then can connect to many different types of systems. What we really knew and had competence in was to translate all of those urban flows into emissions and environmental impacts. So that's what we added up here. And we had a data model that represented the city from a city perspective all the way down to a room in a household. And then we had a calculation engine that then through some APIs could create real-time feedback. And that was what we initially thought was what was going to be the most interesting part of this. So we provided real-time feedback to our stakeholders on a city level, building level, and to the citizens. And then as a side bonus, we ended up with a lot of data, big data. And we started exploring that more in depth. And through that, we learned some really interesting stories that we could lead to inform much better decisions also. And I will get into some examples of that. I'll skip that. So in terms of the real-time data, this is looking at a household. You have the energy sources, the intermediary sources, and transformative sources, and then you have the end users in my household here at a given time. And this is really where smart urban metabolism becomes smart, because typically you could only do this at a city level, maybe on a 10-year perspective, or in the best case on a 1-year perspective. This is updated essentially in real time. So here you can follow household waste that is measured for my household with a special sensor. Some of that is combustible, that goes to my district heating utility that co-powers electricity and district heat, which heat ups my apartment and my tap out water. And the electricity goes to the Nordic grid, which is then used to pump and treat my water for my showers. And the other end uses the other electricity goes to my home. Now, the other layers on this would be do the same for my building and for the entire district. Who cares about this? Not a lot of people, but a very few small group of urban metabolism researchers that use this to figure out the width of each box you see here is the amount of greenhouse gases going through that flow. So if you're dealing with a greenhouse gas study, this is basically the type of tool you would use to figure out where are the big flows and where should we put in the needle to make an intervention to make this system work a little bit better or become more green or sustainable. Then we can take that same data and provide feedback. Back in 2012, we were playing around with augmented reality. So I guess here you could ask it, what's the greenest building near me? And it would point you to it and who is the developer of that. Here we had, you could, if you go close to that building, you could look at its performance by just holding your phone against it, and then you would see the heating, the electricity, the water, renewable energy, waste, and greenhouse gas emissions compared to the neighborhood average. This was maybe interesting if you have a visitor from another country or so. We also created a smart city dashboard, and apologies for the poor UX in this image, but this was developed by a master thesis student back in the days. What's interesting about this is we asked the residents, and we knew what they're going to say. That we've been working on all of these key performance indicators for a few years now, and we want to put them up on a dashboard on your wall. The residents really didn't want that. They were like, what are we going to do with that? If you're just going to show us like 4 numbers on the wall all the time. We knew that they were going to say that because we had done some studies before. We asked them a follow-up question. Well, how would you like to have it? And they said something really important that rhymes with lean principles. And they said, create some value for us. I have a son that is always late to the bus. Let me know when he's gonna be going. I walk to work, so let me know if I need to bring an umbrella. And my wife, she takes this route, so if you can put all the road monitors, so she knows if she should stay at home or take the bus instead of driving that day. So we threw in like 30 different types of sources for them on weather and energy and traffic and water and social and other aspects, so that they maybe every now and then would look at these boring indicators. That's important. We'll come back to that. But as a concept, if we want to engage with our workers or with our citizens, the thing is to first create value for them, and we'll dig in a little bit deeper into that. And I'm seeing that the time is going away, so I'm going to speed this up a little bit. As I mentioned, there is a bunch of big data that is being created as well, and we're going to look at 2 examples of that data. So we had so much data that I was giving this data to my students with a non-disclosure agreement. And for instance, here they created the first waste map of Stockholm. And this was interesting, but we couldn't do anything with this. We could look at different holidays and different days of the week and times of day. There's about more than a few million data records behind this map, but it really didn't help us. So we tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked, and then finally we had an idea. Let's track all the trucks that have been collecting this waste instead. And then we saw something interesting. In a very crowded part of Stockholm, this was happening during a 2-hour time. You had 5 heavy-duty waste collection trucks collecting waste on the same streets. And we thought that was a bit ridiculous, but we thought maybe it's just a one-off going on in this area. So we looked at the entire city of Stockholm. And here the red parts are some of the most congested parts of Stockholm. And here you have 15 companies registered and basically trucks registered to pick up waste at the same address. So that became a problem. We asked why this was going on, and we took this to the municipality, and they realized, okay, well, we passed a law that created a free market. So wherever you could find a customer, that's where you got it. Even though it was a publicly procured, they had the power to not do that. They could have done that a bit smarter. So we went back and made an analysis of the city. We zoned the city in a number of different parts and saw if everybody keeps the same number of customers, what happens? Well, the result was 53% less miles traveled, 46% less time in traffic, a big win. And this was unknown to us until we started to look at the data. Really, they weren't even aware of this at the city. Nobody had reflected about this. It was out there in the open, but again, we just had to explore the data enough with the right set of questions. And luckily, just recently, they passed this and adopted this, and it's been passed by the municipality. They added a few more regions, and yeah, and we hope to be able to evaluate what the real effects was of that. Next, this is Stockholm First Energy Map, and same there. Nice, the city of Stockholm. Oh, sorry, something happened. Let me see here. There we go. It's just it froze a bit. This is nice, and the city of Stockholm wanted to put this up online, to a version of this online to show the citizens, but that's not so interesting. What is interesting is this. We combined energy technology simulation specialist with industrial economists to create, we think, the world's first municipal retrofitting plan. This map is answering the following question. By the way, we've zoomed out to zip code because we can't disclose single buildings. Here are the 600 out of these 20,000 buildings and these 130 million points of data, energy data. Here are the 664 buildings to be retrofitted with the following measures: glass insulation, to reach the local climate goals with the lowest investment cost and highest return. And that enables surgical type of policies from the city and the national government to work much more with this group instead of what they're doing today, is having blunt retrofitting grants. If you want to retrofit, you can apply for a grant with us, and because we want to speed up retrofitting in Stockholm. And this is really useful because the city of Stockholm don't have a lot of power on retrofitting, or they have zero power. All they can do is to educate and try to cater to them. So this is actually being developed on quite a bit, and there's a research platform around this, and we intend to take this to the Paris member agreements, where they have a national determined contribution group only focused on building energy efficiencies. And we think by providing them with this methodology where the utilities get a much greater role, with essentially having a gold mine of data, we hope to be able to help them speed up their work. We'll see how that goes, but that's that part of the endeavor. So the key takeaways on data is most of the urban data is already out there. It does, however, require skillfully crafted collaborations. A large share of the values will be discovered long after we connected the systems. And this can create some problems when you're thinking about it from a business model perspective, but it's solvable. And we think we only have scratched the surface on what data can do for lean construction and smart cities. And the last one with about, okay, we'll have to keep this pretty brief. Respect for people. In the lean construction industry, you've taken much better care about the workers than the smart cities have taken care of the citizens. A few smart cities have started taking care of the citizens as well. The biggest thinker on smart cities, Anthony Townsend, he wrote an excellent book on this, where he's essentially seeing a top-down technocratic smart city and a bottom-up citizen-empowered smart city blossoming up. And the International Panel for Climate Change, the ones that are leading the whole climate change global effort, they're now for the first time saying if we're going to reach our 1.5 degree heating goal, for the first time they're actually talking about behavior and lifestyle changes to create significant future reductions with social innovations through bottom-up initiatives, if we're going to be able to meet this goal. which is quite interesting. And as a response to all of this, our research group have launched a national R&D program worth around 100 million euros, where we have coined the term viable cities to really put the citizen at the heart and core of the smart city, very much so that you're doing in the lean construction industry. And essentially, you can apply for grants to viable cities, but citizen engagement is the standard now, and you won't get any funding if you don't have a very clear idea on how you're going to engage the end users and the citizens, and not just build technology for the sake of technology. So the reason why nobody is doing it in the smart cities is because it's so hard. It's really, really hard to do citizen or customer engagement. Sustained pro-environmental behaviors is challenging, whether they're done manually or aided by systems or automation. And let's see here. All right. Let's just really briefly talk about 3 barriers, and I will keep this quite brief. The distancing, information overload, and absence of practical value. Distancing means that we used to be if we did bad or behaved poorly, for instance, we soiled our water, we contaminated our water, or we contaminated our soils, we would discover that quite soon because we didn't have any clean drinking water, or we couldn't grow our crops. Now, today, on this call, we're so decoupled from the consequences of our small decisions that doesn't happen to us anymore. I think while we're all good people and we want to do well, we just don't see the consequences, and that's why it becomes really hard for us to know what to do. So we need to make that connection to everybody again, saying, hey, your small decision actually has a real world implication that is not so good, and that's yours and nobody else's. So that's a big challenge. But even if we succeed with that, that's not enough good feedback. We also have this issue of information overload. We are getting in a week now, we're creating and consuming in a week more than our ancestors did in a lifetime. And then, given how busy most of us are nowadays, a typical information campaign doesn't work. To be able to really cut through and engage with citizens, we have to create real value. This is what we talked about a few slides ago. Some type of concrete value for them. So let me just ask Billy really quick. Billy, I am so sorry. Would it be okay if we went above a few minutes? I think I just would need 4 more minutes before wrapping up, or I could leave it at the next slide.
Sure, just go ahead and take a few more minutes. It's okay.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for your patience. I promise we're getting quickly coming to the end. Thanks.
Yeah, so just go ahead.
Okay, great. So these ones I just mentioned, and I'm skipping them. And so we've created, we've researched this for 5 years, integrating sustainable human-computer interaction designers, social psychologists, behavioral psychologists, and to figure out how do we do this. And one of the most important things, again, was to engage them by solving a problem for the citizens. That's the only way we can continuously cut through and keep them conserving energy, or recycling better, or commuting better. And the value we chose to address for them was the following. We noticed that we are quite globally connected today with different social groups almost in real time, but we're quite locally isolated. And this is a global trend going on in Qatar, Sweden, the United States. So we don't have any local cohesion anymore. So the value we decided to create is to connect people that live close to each other in essentially a local social network, if you will, for sustainability, and so they can help each other, and thereby we gain a channel into their lives to nudge them and engage them long-term on sustainability-related matters, to help them make better decisions through the data that we have. And this has also been called a trend: globally connected, yet locally isolated. So the case study 1, we use the inventor of the pneumatic waste system, NVAC, to it's a system that takes away waste, and through which we get household level feedback on recycling rates. And we're essentially adding a digital infrastructure to their physical infrastructure, which is based on apartment level, building, neighborhood level. And we have quite a bit of theory and science going on underneath it. And then essentially they're able to do their social things, but in particular we're providing them this feedback and their monthly reports to nudge them into better decisions as they go along. And so this is a schematic of how we fuse this digital and physical layer. And by increasing the sharing of things in the community, we take in less goods. By increasing the reuse, essentially not throwing away something that works well, like a stroller, and giving away to somebody else, we're increasing the lifetime of the materials that already made it in. And by educating and providing feedback on recycling rates, we maximize the recycling rates. And in each step here, we're reducing carbon emissions. And I think I will skip this because we don't have time. There was a second case study with the same network, where instead we coupled it with in a smart grid project in the EU called Intergrid with 150 residents, and we helped them by using only social tools through the social network to reduce peak loads. So we got, from the participating household, we had 56% peak load reduction, which is very, very high. And these are preliminary numbers, I should mention. And if we divide that for all the all the households, we come down to 14%. And why this is interesting is we compared this with 150 very, very intelligent and smart homes that had smart appliances, smart plugs, smart dimmers, thermostats. And in that project, they were able to reduce their peaks with 5%. And that costed about 2,800 euros per household, while this is barely, and this is already an overrated number, 75 euros max per household. So it's an interesting addition, at least, to these smart tools by finding ways to engage directly with the citizens on their terms. A lot of people that we interviewed in this project with the smart homes, they didn't really understand their system that well. And yes, but that's essentially the last point. So in summary, there's an urgent demand for us professionals in lean and smart to advance our skill sets to meet global and local demands. The concepts of lean construction and smart cities are deeply connected. Any city serious about the environment need leaner construction for smart cities. Setting clear goals and following up on them with extended teams is a critical success factor in lean and smart projects. And the last two bullets, the ability of finding, connecting, and analyzing data from related stakeholders holds immense potential. We need to develop these abilities within our organizations. And I think we will. We will see data scientists in most of our organizations as we progress. Our projects are neither lean nor smart if we do not find a way to engage the often overlooked stakeholder, the workers and the citizens. We do that by creating value for them. And I actually had an example for the workers as well, from a Swedish project, but we'll, if we have time in the questions later, we can get to that. But the principles are the same, create value for them, which is a lean principle. And with that, thank you so much for your time and patience. And I'm sorry I went above the time.
Okay, thank you, Hussein. That was excellent. We love the content, and especially your references to Qatar, as that's very close to us, of course, and all of us are aware of these local projects. So I wish to thank you for dedicating your time and expertise, and for your informative, insightful, and engaging presentation to us this evening. And on behalf of LCI and NAWIC, I'd like to present you with an appreciation certificate.
That's so incredibly kind of you, the LCI Institute of Qatar and the National Association of Women of Construction in Qatar. Incredibly kind of you. I must say it's been my honor and privilege. I have been to Qatar, and the ability to reconnect with your professionals in the same field is really a great honor to me. So thank you so much for the kind words, and also for everybody else that took their time out of their busy lives to listen in.
It's our absolute pleasure. So now we will please, for the attendees, please don't forget to submit your feedback. And again, a plus for positive feedback and a delta sign for any improvements that you suggest. You can enter that in the chat box, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation of the webinar, on the right-hand side and in the chat box. Now we will brief you on the upcoming events for LCI Qatar and NAWIC Qatar. So LCI Qatar keeps on delivering on its commitment to continuous learning and is bringing us Lean in Design Forum, a virtual event on 27th and 28th of May. Normally, this would be available only as a live event in the US, but due to the C-19 situation, LCI Qatar is presenting it and was able to arrange for a virtual presentation. The C-19 situation is giving us the worst and the finest times at the same time, and this event is one of the positives, one of the positive effects of the situation that we are experiencing right now. LCI Qatar is a gold sponsor of this event. The normal cost for this event would be $300 US. However, to enable as many attendees as possible and being a gold sponsor, LCI Qatar are subsidizing the cost and providing this webinar and this opportunity for its members for 200 Qatar riyals or for non-members for 400 Qatar riyals. Also, if you are not already a member of LCI, you can join for 150 Qatar riyals. That's the cost for the annual membership fee. So please, it's well worth attending, and LCI Qatar would like to see as many of you joining us on this and being a part of it. Now I will take you through the NAWIC future events. So NAWIC will present a webinar next month in June on challenges ahead in construction field and available technology tools. And just as this situation started, we had to postpone our live event on Istidana, which was in collaboration with the Qatar Stock Exchange. This event will be reinstated as soon as the government uplifts the restrictions and allows live events for happening. So also in terms of membership, for NAWIC, any first event is free for general audience, but from then on you are required to become a member. So for the membership details, you can find it on our website. So after this, let's answer the questions that we have. Okay, so this is a slide for the live event, again with Qatar Stock Exchange, and it will sort of brief us on UN sustainability development that Qatar Exchange are working very closely with. It will give us some insight into financial literacy, and we will have a key speaker, which will be a surprise. So now, back to the questions. So, Dr. Hussein,
yes.
Can you repeat the estimation formula 250, 75, 80 and explain a little bit again?
Of course, of course. So we can probably even go back, or let me not go back. I have it. I can say it in by heart. So it is essentially just four numbers that define our cities, um, because well, all of us are working with whether in the building projects, or neighborhood projects, or city project. Um, Sometimes we forget the importance of our cities. And these four numbers, they do a pretty good job of explaining to us why it's so critical that we figure out lean construction and smart and all the sustainability tools we have at our disposal to make our cities much, much, much better. And these four numbers is that the cities take up 2% of the entire world's surface today, and they house more than 50% of the population. That number is going to go up to about 60, 70% in the next 2, 3 decades. They consume 75% of the global energy, and they emit 80% of the energy reduction. So on this small, small little surface of the world, that's where it's happening. And I think this puts it in perspective why we really have to work with not creating waste in the first place, looking at the most sustainable technologies from the beginning, helping everybody to make more informed decisions. And sometimes they're quite complex, and there we need data to help us forward. So I hope that I don't know if that explained it, but I hope that clarifies a little bit at least.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
The
you.
following question. Many thanks for this detailed and comprehensive webinar. Could you please highlight more on the verification goals you mentioned? What kind of verification plan can we execute in terms of fossil fuel reductions? Thanks.
Of course, of course. So what we did, for instance, take the Stockholm Royal Seaport, for example, they began setting this mega goal, fossil fuel free 2030. That's the overarching goal. There were some other goals on social and on ecosystem services, but let's focus just now on the fossil fuel ones, because I think that was the question. Then we look into, well, where is all the fossil fuels coming from? Where is it being generated when you create this new city? In construction and in operation. And then we essentially see, well, it's the buildings, it's the transports, it's, now I'm missing something here, it's the energy use and the local energy system, and it's also the waste, recycling or not, and the water treatment. So these are the sources. When we're creating this new part of a city or this new district, this is where we're going to find the fossil fuels. Then we figure out specific goals for each stakeholder and each kind of sector. The buildings get very intense energy demand, say 40 kilowatt hours per square meter. We require them to only buy renewable energy and a number of other goals in that regard. We enforce the use of, say, clean vehicles on site and carpools, renewable energy on site, and also very, very good waste management practices. So pulling all of that together, that's where we will then, setting all of those requirements, then we will figure out, well, in this verification plan, we'll have this long list of indicators. Maybe just for fossil fuel free, we'll have a list of 150 indicators. And for each one, there's a measurement point where there's going to be some data. And most of that data should already exist. And where it doesn't, we will make sure that it exists by including a sensor on energy, or making sure that the building developers are putting in some type of building management system that also is calculating how much energy they're using on the in the domestic apartments, and so forth. So you have the goals. Here we set a list of, say, some overarching goals and then a lot of sub goals. And for each sub goal, you have a verification point. You do this a lot in green building certification systems, where you then it's called M&V, measurement and verification. This is essentially the same, but on a district level. And what gets sometimes challenging with these goals is it's not always easy, even if you know that there's going to be data. In what system do they go to, and how do we make sense of all of that data, and how do we collect it in the first place? So there is some challenges in that, and there a digital master plan is a great tool to streamline that beforehand. You can do it without, and we have done so, but with a digital master plan, it's much easier. So I hope that explained it a little bit, and if not, you can refer to M&V plans, measurement and verification plans of green buildings. This is essentially the same, but on a higher level, where we're also tapping into, we're asking utilities and other stakeholders also to throw in data. So I hope that helped.
Great, thank you. Next question. As you said, Hussein, LC and SC are two sides of a coin. Then what exactly is the difference between the two?
Right. Well, I phrased it's a great question, and we thought it might create a little bit of confusion. I actually framed that in the introductory slide as a question. Are they? And this was a question I had myself initially. And it turns out they're not exactly the two sides of the same coin. There are differences among them. So lean construction, where I must admit I'm not an expert, here you're looking into very detailed on the construction phase, but also on the other phases, but in terms of planning, integrated project delivery, and how to reduce waste, how to minimize workforce accidents, and increase the health of the workers. So those would be kind of maybe some of the core aspects, also increasing efficiency, obviously, mostly in the construction phase. And in a smart city project, you typically don't do that. In most smart city projects, you almost begin as if the city is already constructed, and now we're optimizing, we have intelligent transportation systems, and we have smart buildings, and we have smart grids that speak with the residents and speak with the electric vehicles or the solar panels. So everything is kind of in the operational phase in the smart city. So the smart cities are limited, I think, as that previous slide went, to the operation phase, whereas lean construction and lean thinking as a culture goes across all phases. But in practice, in most projects today, it has a stronger focus on the construction phase. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily two sides of the same coin, but rather they're very complementary. If any of you or me or Billy was a mayor of a city, and we wanted to make that city the most environmental friendly city we could, then we would say, okay, the goal here is going to be use lean construction principles for the entire construction phase and turn it in, and then use smart city principles to help us meet our environmental goals during its operation phase. That's probably how we would set it up. So in that sense, I would say they're complementary and not necessarily two sides of the same coin. Hope that responded to the question.
Thank you. I'd like just to take a moment and remind the audience to give us their feedback, plus for positive and delta sign for improvements. Please give us your feedback, as this really helps us to provide you with better webinars, better events, and give us a really good base and for the improvement. Please feel free, positive, negative. We're trying to avoid the word negative. That's why we're using delta. But it's much appreciated if you could give us that. Okay, to the next question. But rather, who pays for all of this?
Sure. Well, it's a good question. It's a good question. Well, so I don't know is probably the first honest response to that. But well, when you're building a city, there's going to be some investment, and well, I can take the example from Sköndal, this church foundation. They're not very rich. This church foundation. They actually have some financial issues. The ones that are building this land, building this project for 5,000 apartments. They're not even in the central part of Stockholm. They're in the south part where the land is not super expensive. However, there are landowners. They're selling off the land to building developers to build on that land, and they're setting, when they're in that contract, they're putting in the requirements. So essentially they're saying you can build here, and this is actually going on right now. So I think tomorrow the building developers for the second phase of the project are going to get a call for proposal for them with all the documentation. And they're just going to say, if you want to build here, it's fine if you make a profit of the apartments you're going to sell, but here's all our list of requirements. And we've been helping them set all of those requirements for renewable energy and energy use and transportation systems and waste management practices and construction materials and construction practices, a long list of materials. And then in that context, if you're at that stage, the digital stuff doesn't cost so much. Honestly, it doesn't. It could be a bit complex, but it doesn't drive up costs so much. Again, there to be really frank, a lot of in the previous project in the Stockholm Seaport, the initial work we did was with existing data. The hard part was, paying somebody's salary like me to go and knock on people's doors to get access to data, and then having students to create some feedback or playing around with some augment. But again, this is 2012, very immature work. That's not the type of stuff we're doing today, very early on. But I mean, you can do a whole lot with the existing data that already exists in your cities if you can connect that. It is hard, so I'm not going to say that that's the solution. But then in a new development project, the additional sensors of a smart meter or having an entrance screen in the lobbies, which most of the projects in Qatar already have, it's not driving up costs so much. There is, however, going to be changed practices of how we work, of how we organize. Well, who's going to own the data? What's the legal aspects of it? Is there going to be a hub? How is things communicated forward? Who's going to be managing? All of a sudden, we're just not managing bills anymore and collecting rents. We're managing the environmental performance and maybe even the social performance of a district. There is no specific role for that at the developer or a planning or a city planning or a municipality today. So those are the larger questions. In the case of this church, they have quite a large organization there in this district, so they want to take on that role to be kind of the voice of the community and manage a lot of that. So they want to. So that's the larger issues. And then obviously, if you talk about renewable energy, solar panels, and some building technologies, they can be expensive, but their costs have exponentially been going down and will be going down as we go forward. So they will become much more affordable. And then depending on who the bank is and how the investment solutions look like, a lot of these systems pay for themselves. So it really depends a lot. If you have a long-term investor that wants to make an investment for, say, a pension fund and rent out for apartments, then they're pretty happy to make a little bit higher investment upfront, knowing that their payback is going to be higher and higher as these systems start paying themselves back, because they do that. There is a monetary upside to all of these systems. But if you just want to buy and sell it to a profit within a year, then they probably would say no. And it is, so you're bringing up a really, really good issue. And the financial systems, the metrics look very different all over the world. And yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging. And that takes us back to the previous slides, that these skill sets that is among us here on this call right now, they're critical, because we have to, nobody else is going to figure this stuff out. So we have to figure it out. It is possible. That's why we had these case studies to show, like, there is ways to do it, but there is no cookbook, and it's not gonna, what we did in Sweden is not gonna translate exactly the same way into Qatar or another country. So you just gotta figure it out. But I mean, they've already done that in Qatar, by the way. Arab and Lusail and the Pearl, among others, and now with the national Smart Nation program. So it is possible, but yeah, I feel you with the cost question is always there.
Sensitive, yeah. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. I can see that some of the attendees have been pulling sign plus. We need if you could please elaborate and tell us what you liked. Also, if there are any deltas, please tell us what you would like us to see to improve on. And also, once when the webinar is over, for you to exit the webinar, please go to the ribbon on the top of your screen to the file. Drop-down box will appear and select exit webinar. That will take you out of the screen and out of the GoToWebinar. So okay, so let's see. We do have quite a few questions still left. So we will kindly ask Dr. Hussain to answer this, and we will post them with the presentation slides next week. So they will be available for you for your viewing. And once again, before the time is out, I'd like to thank you, Hussain, for your time. It was very, very insightful, you know, looking at the questions, you know, very engaging, interesting, and audience would obviously like to know even more about it. And also thank you to all attendees for making time to join us. You know, it's an evening, it's a festive season, so we appreciate that a lot. Again, thank you all. Stay safe, stay well, and until next time.
Thank you so much, everybody, from my side as well, and thank you so much, Billy, for hosting and arranging this wonderful evening.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Great. Thanks. Okay. Bye.
See you.